Welcome indeed to the LCS post-game lobby. Not just me and Dracos.
We are all shocked.
Let's the important people.
The important people. Well, and Martin Deficio and Vedius.
Hi, Vedius.
Hi, Deficio. How are you? Tired after your cast?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of talking in that game because as a caster, we talk a lot.
You did a great job.
Thank you, mate. I think you did okay today.
Well, I think...
you did great.
I think we actually had some great games. Let's take a look at the standings after today. Fnatic and G2 are still leading the league, rather ahead of Vitality, but some interesting stuff happened. Schalke obviously just picked up a win over Misfits. Unicorns of Love picked up another win. There's a lot of craziness, and you guys are going to give me your playoff predictions in just a bit, but we said at the beginning of the day, we can't say anything for sure, and I think nothing has changed.
So just to clarify, like H2K and UOL could still make it into playoffs.
Yeah.
Just because of how close they are to 4 other teams, even 5. Like, they're not that far off of Giants.
I mean, we got plenty of weeks left with a lot of games to be played. Medic would already write Schalke off if they lost this game, despite being like 1 win behind. So I think with this, like, I would not be surprised if this whole thing shuffled around again, except for the top 2 teams.
Yeah. Well, we will see, and we're halfway through week 6, and the playoff race is on. And with that, I want to get your guys' predictions. Who will make it to playoffs and who won't? Now, I got all of your picks, but we're going to start off with the Deficio's picks for who he thinks is going to make it into playoffs and also his rankings. They're going to come up in just a second. It's just a bit of tension. We're just building up. A bit of drum roll.
We've all got different ideas.
Yes.
So
right now, the graphic guys are making their own one and just
there we go.
There we go. So these are the Deficio's picks for getting into playoffs with G2 Esports #1, then Fnatic, Misfits, Team Vitality, Schalke, and Splyce. Now, I've seen all of your picks, and I'm just going to pick a couple of things that I want to talk about that stand out to me. I got to say, first up, Splyce making it in. I know that these 2 guys don't have Splyce making it in. So it's up to you, Deficio, to tell me why you think they deserve to make it to playoffs or why they will.
So for me, it's between them and Giants. For number 6 here, I got Giants just outside this one. I think Splyce have better individual players, which will benefit them, especially now when we get a giant meta shift, most likely with the new patch. I think they can adapt it also with Peter Dunn really well, the coach on the team. They have a giant coaching staff behind them. I see like 5 people sitting and watching the game backstage, all individual coaches.
Yeah, so many people, that must mean that they're gonna like...
I think, like, seriously, I actually think that's gonna help them a lot prepare for what it's gonna be, like most likely a big meta shift coming into the next week. And I prefer Copy. Big time over someone like Steelback right now, and I think that's going to be the crucial thing in the end that gives Splyce a playoff spot.
All right, and I see that you didn't get swayed by what happened today, which is obviously good of you to hang on to what you believe. Splyce didn't win versus Unicorns of Love. Steelback and Giants did win versus Vitality. So Dracos, there are definitely some points of contention here. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Martin's just been on the Bitcoin hype train too much. He doesn't know when to pull out. You know, he thinks this team is still going to do well. I mean, for me, you talk about this big coaching staff. I think they absolutely botched the draft today. I think that they still haven't shown a lot of variance in their drafting. They played basically 2 games where they've won via 1-3-1, one against an underperforming Giants, one against a very underperforming H2K. And I think that they haven't really shown me any kind of evidence that they can adapt. And yes, Peter Dunn does have an impressive coaching track record, but I think assuming that that's going to work for them in coming changing metas is not a safe bet, and definitely not one that I'm betting on.
So we'll see who then you have in the place of Splyce. When you talk about plans, coaching, all that, I think about Misfits Gaming. You put them 3rd here, and obviously they just lost the game
one I feel kind of shaky about.
But aside from that, it seems that you still have a lot of faith in Hussein Mousvi and his project with these players.
Yeah, the thing about Misfits is they're really annoying to watch at the moment, because you sit there and you're like, holy moly. Israel power spike, clean Baron calls, great snowballing. I love it. And then, a bit like Schalke, once or twice per game, there's a big mistake. I almost said something else here. Big mistake where something can just go completely wrong. And at the moment for Misfits, it's mainly in the late game where they have these big problems, where they end up either getting a little bit outscaled or they take a bad fight that then buys a lot of time for the enemy team. And then the next fight, they execute poorly. So that hurts me a lot. But I still think, because I'm seeing so many good things early and mid-game, I feel like, also kind of depending on what's going to happen the next few weeks meta-wise, I think they have enough good things going for them that they can become one of the best teams. But I think they are far away from from G2 and Fnatic.
I agree.
This is a third where they're kind of hanging on, and G2 Fnatic are stepping on the hand, trying to get rid of them.
Because just to add on, I too put them in the 3rd place. That was my expectation for Misfits. I do not think that they will finish there, but you just look at the raw individual talent.
Why'd you put them there?
Yeah, wait.
Why did I put Misfits
That's
in 3rd?
finished. This is where they finished, dude.
If you don't think they're going to finish there.
because now I don't, right? Because
got it.
Did you see? Did you see that they were like stomping for like the first 25 minutes?
It was
of that
amazing,
game, right? And again, like they do this all the time, and I'm a very confident believer in Hans Sama's ability to play things like Hans Sama. I think he's the best Ezreal in our league.
He's good at playing Hans Sama.
Very good at playing
Sorry,
Ezreal, got it. Playing Ezreal.
He's a really good Ezreal player, and as you said, yes, they're good at playing around the spikes. I think they're the only team in the league right now that does it so well, but they just fail to close out, and it just comes back to what we were talking about earlier on, which is like they just seem to lack that extra thing to bring them in line with Fnatic and G2, where they're just not quite at the point yet where they're playing perfect League of Legends.
Well, we'll move on to Verius' picks in a second. One thing I want to interject here is that from you two guys, you both have Misfits actually pretty high up in the rankings. And you guys, when you talk about teams, you talk about in a perfect world, if every player does exactly what they're supposed to, and if the plan works out, then this should happen. But I think oftentimes you guys disregard kind of the competitive environment and the crazy things that can happen. Unicorns of Love for seasons has been a point, like a case in point for that, right? So
yeah, I'd love to comment on that. The main reason for that is thank you. The main reason for that is you can't predict the unpredictable things that could happen in games. What you can predict is if a team has a champion who's stronger at this point in the game, they should play around the champion, and this should happen, because that's just kind of a numbers game almost, and something we see when you watch the absolute best teams in the world play. It's very hard to always try and predict the big upset where you're like, oh, okay, I think this team will then pull out a surprise strategy, and then this is going to happen with it. And for me, I try to take what I consider the safest option. The only team I kind of regret not having in there is actually Giants. Because one, they picked up a lot of wins already, and they did show a lot of good things around Betsy Joko, which I really liked in the game they played today. But that was, of course, one game after a bad losing streak.
Well, we'll also check in with your picks in a couple of weeks as well, and also maybe even in 2 weeks, and see if you want to change something. But now I want to go over
oh god, this is going to be
Verius' picks. Let's take a look at Verius. So he has G2 Esports and Fnatic 1 and 2, Misfits 3. That is the same. But then he has Roccat at number 4 over Team Vitality and Giants. Obviously, jumps out, Roccat and Giants. Tell me, Verius, why do they deserve?
I am a big believer in this Roccat lineup. I think that they have a lot of really strong individual talent, and a lot of their teamwork, for me, has been extremely impressive. Last week, I made the claim that they are one of our best mid-game teams in the league, simply due to their ability to understand how to play around their win conditions, their natural vision control around objectives, and just knowing what to do at the right point in the time. Their biggest weakness has only ever been their early game, which recently has been much more exploited. Sometimes they've struggled to play around their win conditions properly, and sometimes they've made a couple of individual mistakes, which is why I think experience is the biggest thing for this roster. And once we approach the end of the season, I was expecting them to pick up a lot of solid wins and make their way up towards the standings, as Vitality seems to be struggling to find their form and fit into the meta.
Let me get in.
Yeah,
I can see you want to get in. But so for me, I think that it's good that you bring up the lack of veteran leadership. I think Memento being a leader generally has worked for the team in their wins, but it definitely hasn't been consistent. I don't think that they have incredible talent in every lane. I think everyone is fine. I don't think anyone is a clear weakness, which I think is an edge they have over many teams who currently have maybe a weak AD carry or a weak mid laner. Giants, for instance, weaker AD carry, Splice, and Misfits both playing with weaker mid laners. I think that's a big boon for them. I think they've also shown, as you're talking about, pretty good macro. I have them in my list. I think they absolutely will make playoffs, but I don't think they're going to be as high up as 4.
Yeah, I think that is an impressive one for me, that you put them as the 4th place. Obviously, the big one that sticks out also is that Team Vitality is then at number 5, which, due to recent events, seems more and more logical.
So the reason why they're 5 and above Roccat is because I don't necessarily think that Roccat is... I basically think Vitality are going to lose a lot more games over the next few weeks. I think that teams have a better understanding of how to take advantage of their playstyle, and I also think that Vitality seems to be struggling to play in a way that isn't the way that they're comfortable, which is successful through mid and setting up Jizuke for success.
Well, you have them still in your playoff list. Dracos does not believe. Let's take a look at his rankings. Fnatic, G2 Esports, Schalke, Misfits Gaming, Giants, Rocket, no Vitality, and Schalke third. You have some explaining to do.
Interesting.
All right, so I guess let's start with Vitality, since they did not make the cut. Since the losing streak has started, I would have given them credence if they could have won today. I think that their one successful moment, which was a level 2 gank in the bot lane from Gilius, he's been doing for weeks now, and I think the fact that the opposition didn't see it coming was really disappointing. And I think generally this feels to me like a team that is going to continue to decline. I spoke to them today in the makeup room. They still felt like they were in good spirits, but I think you can only lose so much. And from what we talked about with Reckless on the podcast, Euphoria, it does not feel like this team has been playing a really solid team game at any point. They have looked really good when individual members can get a lead, takes pressure off of everybody, easy to play together, easy to keep it going. Since then, when they start to lose, when they start to crumble, they look really, really bad. Now, they do have a lot of wins. You talked about them having a win buffer, but I don't think it's enough, and I think that we're going to continue to see them fall and pick up losses as we move forward.
I struggle to see them go on a complete tilt losing streak where they lose everything. Like, if you pick up 8 wins, it should realistically at least get you around 6th place. For Vitality, and I can definitely see this team. Like, I think what they're going to do is they're going to go back and they're going to try again to watch, okay, why are we losing these games? Like, what is the one thing that is so different from, you know, when we all were on this winning streak? One of the problems seems to be a lot of teams are banning out, you know, Ryze, Zoe, these kind of champions that Jizuka can snowball on. We might see him try different kind of picks where he can have more of an early game impact. I think bot lane was actually set up to succeed in the game they just played. I think this game could have gone very, very different based on one dragon fight that actually went in favor of Giants. So I think Vitality will pick up enough wins to lock playoffs. I will say, though, I actually really like Schalke third on your list. I thought if I had, you know, after this game, looked at this Schalke lineup again and said, you know what, I can actually see them go higher up again because I think this was a huge game for Upset. Just what he needed because he played so well and his aggressive plays actually paid off.
Yeah, I think that's crucial here. That game versus Misfits, that turning point where they turn it around, that's one of those games that I think they'll look back on in the race for playoffs in a couple of weeks and say, this is where we took control of our own destiny.
And I have to be honest, I'm not a super Schalke faithful. I did have them ready to swap with Misfits at a moment's notice if this game turned against them, but Upset did show up. They do look really good. And when we look at the games that Schalke has been losing, it's very small individual mistakes or poor decision-making in just very random moments. And I think that it's easy to tighten up small mistakes like that in pursuit of playoffs. I think that people give a lot of credit to sports staff, but that's not really part of my argument. I think they have strong individual laners. I think they have good talent, and they've shown good macro game, which is all the building blocks I think they need to be a top
competitor. Well, let me just jump in there. If we are not 100% sure that Upset will be able to perform in every high-stakes situation, then where do you put your money when it's in those last games that they need to qualify for playoffs?
I mean, for me, I think anyone on this team can do relatively well. I don't think that they'll put credence on Vizicachi. Meta changes will kind of dictate a lot of this, but I think Nukeduck has been a good carry for the team. I think we'll go kind of as the unsung hero in that game. One of those last team fights, he was actually massive for the team to win, for Upset to be that cleanup. But I think we will hit a point with a lot of these 80 carry nerfs coming in where it will be okay for Upset not to be on a hyper carry and for the team not to be in a position where he needs to be this late game, flash forward, sniping people kind of 80 carry.
All right, we need to move on. I'm sorry, Vedius. I just want to hear from Dracos on a couple of lines why Giants, it was actually also in your list, so why do you guys think that Giants will make it?
I put them in 10th, and I have to. They stepped up this week. They really were.
Oh, that is true.
Yeah, I put 10th. Yeah, we did it just to
they were horrible last week.
So
a lot of credit to them for being much better this week, but last week was really rough for Giants.
And they've shown weaknesses throughout the split. But this, to me, shows that they have the capacity to improve, and I think the fact that they're in a really good position in the standings right now in terms of wins, I see them beating all of like the middle of the pack teams and the teams that are below them at this point in the season.
And I just want to quickly add that this is clearly very difficult for all of us because you have such mixed performances from weeks to weeks. Some, like all of us predicted
best
Vitality.
Of one, baby.
That's what we love.
Everyone
It's best of one. Expected Vitality to just come out again and smash and be back on form and step on Giants who had a bad week last week, but they didn't. Giants are the ones that improved. I kind of had higher expectations of Rocket versus G2 today. They got crushed. Some people believed that Splice would be able to just crush over unicorns, and then unicorns, like so many teams are just having mixed performances each week, which is why I think that this is so challenging, and I literally think all
makes
three
it
of us,
fun, man.
like, could very well be right in our predictions.
all wrong.
Almost why we decided to let you all make your picks at this point.
I think it's easy. I think Vedius is wrong. Let's do it. Let's go. I'm getting 6 out of 6.
As a key takeaway, it's very difficult to predict. Unicorns of Love and H2K are in no one's list, and Fnatic and G2 Esports are in the top 2 spots for everyone.
Yep.
So those are 2 key takeaways, and everything else is up in the air. So we'll see how the standings shake out, and we'll be sure to check back in with you guys as the playoff race continues. And I mentioned G2 Esports and Fnatic. They are the 2 front runners in the league right now, and they're facing off in our match of the week tomorrow. And we had this earlier in the split. We built it up, and mea culpa, it wasn't the best game.
Clash of Clowns. Didn't work out.
But now those teams are absolutely on a high. 7-game win streak for G2. 6-game win streak for Fnatic. G2 got their revenge on Roccat. Fnatic, they won as well versus H2K. So the setup is there.
And I also like the fact they're winning in different ways. G2 is a lot more slow. Make sure you know 100% what the enemy team is going to do, how you counter it. Okay, now we get the tempo advantage, we get a little kill there, and then we get a turret. Like, they can win a game 5-1.
Yep.
And it was a stump. Even though it was 5 kills to 1 only, it was still a stump because they got all the turrets and the enemy team barely got anything.
And Fnatic's the opposite.
Fnatic's the opposite. It's a lot more fighting. It's a lot more set caps and Reckless up to really carry fights. Like Reckless on Xayah in the late game.
Oh, yeah.
Woo-hoo-hoo. That was amazing.
But Veigar as well, dude. Landing so many difficult to land skill shots in crucial fights. Like, I was really impressed with Caps' Veigar today, and I am really hyped for tomorrow. I think that you're going to have 2 clashes of very different styles, and I'm not entirely sure which one will come out on top.
Let's take a look at some of the lane matchup you just mentioned. Caps versus Perks. It's one of those that I guess you never think it's going to be a huge difference because they're both very good. But it also means if something goes awry and if one gets a solo kill, they can run away with the game. So do you think there's a lot of wild card possibilities in this matchup, or will it just go pretty standard and go on the other parts of the
No
map?
one's allowed to pick Galio.
No.
That's
gonna be banned.
Don't do it. Please ban it.
So there is a high chance we get like Azir versus Corki, and then not a lot will happen in the early game between them. It comes down to team fighting instead.
So who's better?
Better in late game. I think that's almost impossible for me to say because I think both players. I'm just crying a little bit here because we're talking about great European mid laners. I love them so much. Who's better? I think Perks is more important.
I mean, this is hard.
Like, whenever these guys play against each other, Caps has actually gotten the upper hand on Perks quite a few times. Perks definitely has the achievements and the history behind him to say he's the greater one. But pure individual 1v1 talent, Caps has shown multiple times that he is not worse than Perks by any means.
I mean, I think Perks has that clutch factor late game. And that's the X factor you talk about. I think that's one of the biggest shining spots for G2. We saw it in the quarterfinals versus Splice last time. Beautiful Cassiopeia plays. I think at the same time, though, Caps has stepped up this season and has been willing to be more of a playmaker. But I think it's a veteran experience thing when it comes to the really late game clutch decisions.
Well, let's talk about combinations then of like strengths and carries. Obviously for Fnatic, we got to look at both Caps and Reckless together. Now that it's going well for Reckless, they look really, really scary because he's been stepping up. So how do we think the difference between him and Hjarnan is going to play up into this matchup, Vedius?
I think that Reckless is by far the clear favorite in this 1 versus 1, but obviously that's not the only deciding factor in here. And one thing I've been really impressed with is how the duo has been working with their team. Today we saw some great usage of the Tahm Kench ultimate to increase the playmaking of G2. They said pretty publicly, like, okay, we could have been faster in how we closed out this game, but overall I've been impressed with how much better and how much more reliable they've been in the bottom lane. What they seem to lack is the playmaking and confidence the Reckless and Hylissang have pretty consistently demonstrated. The fact that these guys are willing to take risks and willing to go all in was kind of the thing that I think Hylissang added a lot to Reckless's playstyle, and no longer do we call this guy from back in the day the super safe AD carry that plays on the back line, because today he was always in your face and he was always willing to make those plays.
And we heard it from Reckless. He said this was pretty much an immediate upgrade for lane. It was weaker in the late game, but it feels like it's getting better and better. And I think they have looked so good together, pushing the limits a lot on Xayah and Rakan today in terms of how risky you can play it, how forward you can play it. And that's the kind of thing that I think wins games against other top teams.
Yeah, I feel like you guys are saying it doesn't really matter, even if there's slight difference in one lane. Oh, you disagree?
Yeah, I think there's a huge mismatch here, which is going to be in favor of Fnatic. With the Caps Perks one, it's like Caps mechanics maybe slightly better than Perks is smarter and has more experience, and then it kind of evens out because they're so close. Bot lane, I think Reckless, Hylissang, better laners. I think Reckless, superior late game team fighter as well. So I think what G2 should do is trying to pick a very neutral bot lane where there's not a risk of Fnatic getting an advantage. Like something like a Varus for Yana would be great, you know, super strong lane, and then rely more on perks and Wonder in team fights.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is Wonder then what counteracts this? Is Wonder gonna be?
He needs to be, I feel like, for late game team fights. He had a good game today, for sure. He's had a lot of good games in the past as well, but it's like one of those games where if he performs extremely well in late game team fights and G2 win the game based on that, he really shows that he's the best performing top laner.
It's so interesting overall because like for Soaz, you can't say he sometimes plays a little risky and gives up deaths, but he's always drawing attention as well, and he can also have a huge impact. So it's very hard to call, so I'm just going to ask you guys to call it. Dracos, you can start. Predictions, G2 Fnatic.
I'm going to go Fnatic. I think the bot lane absolutely outclasses, and I do not think that the difference in top lane is enough to be significant. I think a lot will depend on the junglers, and as long as Jankos doesn't get Zac and neither AD carry gets Tristana, Fnatic will win.
Yeah, we didn't even mention Jankos, and he's also
So that was exactly that. G2 is who I think will take this game, largely because of the jungle mid synergy that Perkz and Jankos have been able to develop. I think they'll build up a lot of early pressure, and I'm expecting a pretty solid game from G2.
Agree with all those points. G2 wins, Perkz gets MVP, Reckless needs to put on my mask and take a selfie, and that's going to happen tomorrow.
And a G2 Fnatic final?
I wouldn't complain. I think it's the most realistic final right now.
All right. Well, we will see what happens tomorrow. I'll keep you to your predictions. G2 versus Fnatic is our 4th game tomorrow, but there's plenty of more action coming your way, starting with Roccat versus the Unicorns of Love and Misfits versus Vitality. Another crucial matchup, Giants versus H2K, Schalke versus Lights. Oh my god, it's all spicy.
It's the race for playoffs, right? Like, there are only 7 games left for these teams, and it really puts into perspective how important picking up these wins are. Schalke are in a position to get themselves their first 2-0 week, which would be great in terms of confidence, but also Misfits could potentially get themselves a 0-2, which would really hurt their playoff chances.
But then Schalke would have to beat the Splice 1-1 streak, is what they've been doing for the whole split. So that would be a
1-1 streak, notorious.
Great streak.
Hey, it's consistency in a way.
Probably might actually get the playoffs.
Way.
It could get very
if you're 8-8.
We'll have to wait and see. I'm super excited.
Wait, 9-9. 9-9.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
We'll see what happens. But over in the NA LCS Academy, tonight's action is about to start with CLG Academy versus Clutch Gaming Academy. And if you didn't catch all of the games from the EU LCS, be sure to tune in for our rebroadcast after the show over in LA. But as for that, it is time to call the night from Berlin. I really enjoyed this discussion about your playoff picks. We will be checking in with you guys.
I feel like we got nowhere because it's so hard to predict.
That was what was interesting. Well, thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed as well. And we'll see you back tomorrow for more games, 5 more to be exact, in the Spring Split and the race for playoffs. Until then, have a fantastic night.
It's going to get spotted away by Cole. Deja vu, you guys. Big shutdown. How many can he get? Excel's got 1. They're going to pull up 2. Another shutdown. Flips it forward for Kami. Trying for the big outplay. But it's Unicorn standing tall. It was a long 68-minute battle last time around, but the Unicorns have got range. Going to be Perkz coming in. Let's see if Rocket can get the kill. Hextech ultimatum comes out. That all in at the level 7. The promise is hanging over there. You got a 1-on-2. He hops in, but he's outplayed. And it looks like Rocket didn't have much of a chance to get smacked back in. A double kill. Shurima Shuffle Divide is not going to do a whole lot, but buy some time. Eventually going down. There's the triple. And by royal decree, G2 have slain the Kingslayers. Roxa coming around for good measure and good night shock. It's a double kill for Reckless. King will be redeemed. The Emperor's Divide divides absolutely nothing, and it's a shutdown. Reckless trying to prove that he can make the plays too. There's the ace. Reckless coming up with a kill. GG boys. Temple's coming in as well. Vitality pushing forward, but it's all on the Giants. A double for Betsy, shredding through the front line of Vitality. A double though goes across the Jizuke. Duke's killed still back at the start of this. And now Giants trying to back it's all camera shot. Jizuke just doing the work. Ronin though is on the back line. He's getting in a 2-match. Jizuke's gonna fall. Ronin is an absolute demon as he takes out 2. Gets it done, Vitality. Betsy just getting the auto attacks in with the Giants. Destroy Vitality. Jumps forward, Ronin. Isaac does work. Gets a double, looking for the triple aim as well. Maxwell has nowhere to go. And Isaac says, not today to Misfit. Does Mickey, can you do anything to stop Schalke in their tracks? I do not think so, because Schalke have emerged from the ashes of this game.